What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Talking Niners podcast, part of the Blue Wire Hustle Network. I am your host, Kobe Ransom, and 49ers played their first football game, and last week we didn't have a whole lot to discuss. This week is very different. Sam is here and extremely sick, but he is still here. Sam, how are you doing today, my friend?
As you said, I'm pretty sick. My voice sounds a bit off, so you're going to have to bear with me because the show must go on. We did have our first game, and man, was that a up and down game. Started up, ended down, went downhill, but we finished on top. And you know what? We got the win. A win is a win is a win. 1-0. Moving on to week 2, here to discuss week 1. What's up next? Do that all. Let's do it right here. Let's fracking do it.
Fracking. All right, let's start with the bad news first. Jason Verrett and Raheem Mostert are both out for the year. So I'll start with you, Sam. I guess we can start with Jason Verrett. How does that loss affect the 49ers going forward?
I think you look at the Jason Verrett loss. This is the most brutal loss we could have had to this defense. You look at all the positions on this defense, linebacker, defensive line, cornerback, safety, all that stuff. And cornerback was definitely the weakest out of those positions. And Jason Verrett was by far cornerback 1. Mosey is quarterback 2, but he has some issues, health issues. And quarterback 3, you have DeAndre Lenore, 5th-round pick, all that stuff. After that, I'm dying, as you can tell. That awkward pause was me coughing, me to myself. I don't want the viewers to hear that. But anyways, cornerback 4, you got Ambry Thomas. After that, Dante Johnson, Josh Norman. So really not that much depth at this cornerback position. Losing Verrett, probably your best secondary player, it's going to be hard to replace him. And you have Drake Kirkpatrick. You brought him in. But losing Verrett is just absolutely brutal to this team, especially for the year. And, I mean, Verrett's dealt with so many injuries before. And it's tough to see him coming back to this 49ers team, or really in the NFL in general. It's have to be like a one-year prove-it year. We'll see how he recovers. But other than that, I mean, Jason Verrett out for the year is absolutely brutal for this team. It's really going to kill this team a lot. I think this could be the biggest loss of the year for the 49ers if we have as many injuries as last year. And just in general, I don't really see any other bigger loss. Like, even we lost Nick Bosa, we have a healthy D Ford. We have a ton of depth in the edge position. If we lose a defensive tackle, we may lose Kinlaw for a little bit. We have depth there. Quarterback, if we lose one, we have another quarterback who can come in, do something like that. O-line, yeah, that's pretty brutal. I think cornerback is definitely the one position you can't afford to lose.
Yeah, I think that was, what most everyone said going into the year was that cornerback was obviously the weakest position on the defense, and that was the one place the 49ers could not afford to lose Verrett for any time, let alone the entire season. But the 49ers, we know the reason why they didn't address cornerback was because they put a lot of investments into that defensive line, that front seven as a whole. So going forward, this is now time to show that those investments were worth it, that the front seven, can carry a secondary, and that your secondary can play, behind obviously a good front seven. We'll see how that looks going forward. They have Bosa back, they have Ford back. They both played well in that Lions game. Obviously, linebacker core was pretty good in that game against the Lions. Alshire had a pretty good game. Rhett Warner was Rhett Warner. So, and the safeties had good play as well with Ward and Tart. So really, cornerback, can the rest of these guys, can the other 9 guys kind of help, shore up any kind of, deficiencies with the cornerback room? Potentially, the way this defense is built, obviously to get pressure. They didn't blitz much in that Lions game. They dropped 7 in covers very often. So if they're able to do that and get coverage and get pressure with 4 guys, maybe they can kind of salvage, that secondary and make it easier for them. But obviously, losing Verrett means you don't have a guy who can go toe-to-toe, man-to-man with the best, in the game like we did last year when Verrett was able to pretty much take DeAndre Hopkins out of the game. You no longer have a guy who can do that. So teams may look to take on whoever, now there isn't a side of the field that they don't want to go to. Now, both sides of the field will probably get worked for the Niners. So, let's going forward. And then the other loss for the year was Raheem Mostert.
Well, one more thing about the Verrett situation. I think we have to be very lucky that we have such a good defensive line, because if we didn't have a good defensive line, if our defensive line was battered their brains, then losing Verrett would hurt this team way more. Our secondary was a lot better last year because of Verrett, and we didn't have our defensive line. we had to have a good defensive line in order to make this loss a lot less valuable to this team. It's still a valuable loss, major loss for this team, but the defensive line definitely helps out and eases some of the pain.
For sure. And then the other one is going to be Raheem Mostert, who at first was going to be 8 weeks, but then he realized that it was better if he, got the season ending the injury. So no Raheem Mostert, but I think the Niners should be okay at running back. Most of the, with Kyle Shanahan calling the plays, as long as their offensive line's healthy, as long as George Kittle is healthy, they'll be able to create lane for the running backs. We saw Mitchell had a nice game against the Lions. And I think their depth to be okay too. Hasty's a good runner. We'll see Sermon. Obviously, we didn't see him in the first game, but he'll definitely be playing now. And then they'll still be getting Jeff Wilson back at some point. I think Kyle Shanahan said likely November in the interview today or in his press conference. So we will see. I think the running back room will be fine. Obviously, the losing Mostert hurts. You kind of lose his home run hitting ability. But Elijah Mitchell is also a speedster. He can also take it to the house once he gets a crease, once he gets a lane. So I think the Niners running back room will be fine. It's just, just losing Mostert really sucks, especially just for both of these guys who, obviously have dealt with a lot of injuries in their career, and they put a lot of work in the offseason. And then the first game of the year, they're both out for the rest of the season. It's just a tough thing, a tough pill to swallow. But I think the Niners can make up for these losses because of the way they built their defense. And obviously, the running back room and just the running scheme that they have in San Francisco will make up and allow their running game to still be successful.
Yeah, I think Raheem Mostert, that sucks to lose him for the year. He's, in my opinion, he's still a big part of this team. I know I undervalue Mostert a lot on Twitter. I say losing a running back like Raheem Mostert isn't that big of a deal. He is our best running back on the team. So I think that's definitely going to be a decent bit of a loss. But also, mad respect for Raheem Mostert. He said he could have been out 8 weeks. Instead, he decides to risk it, take the year off, and recover for next year. I think that's a major move, especially going into a contract year. I think that's a major move for Raheem Mostert. I think that could ultimately save his NFL career. So major shout out to Raheem Mostert for doing that. In the end, though, as I did say earlier, and I've been saying on Twitter, it's not going to be the biggest loss. I know I love Raheem Mostert, but at the same time, you got Trey Sermon, you got Elijah Mitchell, you got JaMychal Hasty, and then you got that guy from the Ravens, Cannon, I think is his name. We brought him in, signed him off waivers, and we have Juszczyk too. So in the end, not too big of a deal in my opinion, but still a pretty brutal loss.
All right, moving forward, another injury that we need to keep our eyes on is with Javon Kinlaw. He still has not practiced yet, the knee. Kyle Shanahan said that it just hasn't healed correctly, and now we're at the point where coming out of college, Kinlaw had knee issues, and these issues have showed up. Obviously, missed the last game or two last year because of the knee injury, had the surgery in the offseason. And then we had obviously the knee injury this year. Following training camp, he played the one preseason game, hasn't practiced since for the most part. So, Javon Kinlaw, we're at the point where if Kyle's saying it hasn't healed correctly, we're starting to wonder if, is it going to be an off and on thing for the entire season, or will he have to opt to get surgery again? We'll see how it goes. Maybe that's kind of just a negative way of looking at it, but Kinlaw, he might not be available this week. From the sounds of things, and if that's the case, the Niners are going to find a way. Now they got depth, obviously, but at the same time, it's tough to have Kinlaw miss this amount of time and not knowing when he might be back.
Yeah, and I know Javon Kinlaw, he had knee concerns going into the draft. Last year, he had a bit of knee concerns from what I remember, and then this offseason too, he got that surgery, and then he got hurt traveling or something. So his knee issue is pretty big, in my opinion. And I think the fact that this is lingering, it's been lingering for way longer than we expected. That definitely says something. And I definitely think, honestly, considering how much defensive tackle depth we have, again, it's not going to be the biggest loss, but he is definitely our top defensive tackle, depending on where you want to call Eric Armstead. If you want to call him an edge, if you want to call him a defensive tackle, it works out like that. But overall, I definitely think you have to take this injury really seriously. If you have to sim out this year, I say do it, because this is the deepest defensive tackle room you'll ever have, probably. And if you get him better for next year, that's going to work out really well. He might be able to come back during the season as well. So overall, maybe you just see how the season goes before you say we're shutting him down or something. But I definitely think this is something to keep an eye on.
For sure. It's not a whole lot to be confident at the moment right now while Sam continues to go through it over there. He's trying to
I'm literally
fight through
dying
it, man,
right now. Like, put up my comment. I'm literally
Yeah.
dying right now. So if you say, oh, I can't record a podcast because I like broke my leg or anything, I'm dying and I'm still recording the podcast. You may not see me tomorrow. I don't know. I may be dying from talking too much.
I kind of look like Debo.
I disagree. No, I don't see that
that's
at
a
all.
compliment, man, considering how Debo play. Maybe I might be a
It's a
little
compliment.
Debo. I said I can go
I
out
don't really
there.
see
I
that
can
much, though.
run past people, run over people. You know what I'm saying? Hey, Kyle, get me out there, man. I know you got a thing going on Aiyuk. I can go out there and run some routes for you. But speaking of Aiyuk, it's been probably the biggest discussion after the game about whether or not Aiyuk is in the doghouse or not. Now, Kyle was he said he's happy with Aiyuk. And obviously he said he just has missed some time with the injury, trying to work back and everything like that. And just the fact that, but then, you hear that, like, okay, hamstring's the reason why he's not playing. And then he ends it off by saying, if he wants to get more snaps, then he needs to play better than the guy behind him. And that guy behind him right now is Trent Sherfield. So, to me, that means that it's more than just the injury. There's something else that Kyle just isn't seeing from Brandon Aiyuk that he would like to see. And something that Sherfield is showing that, obviously leads to him playing, at least splitting snaps with Brandon Aiyuk. So I'm not too concerned with Aiyuk. I know it's a big talking point, just the fact that going into this season, we expect him to really emerge and become one of the best receivers in the league. I don't think this is the Dante Pettis situation because he's not Dante Pettis. I think he's a lot more talented, a lot better than Dante Pettis was in his rookie year, or really where Pettis was at all with the 49ers. But it's also something to monitor too because going into it, he had the drop pass in 2 of the 49ers preseason games when the pick happened in the Charger game from Jimmy Garoppolo. He said that pick was on Aiyuk because apparently maybe he might have run the wrong route. So there's something that Kyle isn't happy with Brandon Aiyuk, and that's the reason why he only had 20-something snaps. And obviously, I don't think the hamstring is that big of an issue because he had 20 snaps in that game and was a punt returner. And if hamstring was really an issue, I feel like you might have had someone else out there doing that. But going forward, we'll see how he responds to this because obviously we have no idea, what it is that Kyle doesn't like from him, and how long it might take for him to get, his spot back and maybe elevate to the wide receiver 1 in this team. But right now, Debo's the guy. Sherfield is number 2, and right now Aiyuk seems to be number 3.
Yeah, and looking at Brandon Aiyuk, it's definitely a surprise that he wasn't in the lineup or wasn't really getting that many snaps on Sunday. And I definitely think the injury happened, but overall, I definitely think Aiyuk's going to come back and do well, and he'll get used to it. I think the injury definitely hampered him considering how well Trent Sherfield was doing. Because, you look at this team, you really think that Brandon Aiyuk, a first-round pick, a guy who was a star in training camp until he hurt his hamstring, is really going to lose his job to Mohamed Sanu? I don't really think so. Mohamed Sanu is old. We'll just leave it at that. He's good for our team. Is he great? No. He's old. Brandon Ayuk's definitely going to beat out Mohamed Sanu at some point. And for missing a curfew, I did not hear that anywhere. That would be interesting.
A couple times. I saw a rumor a couple times on the timeline. I'm not sure how true it is. I don't know who that came from. But, if that was the reason, I guess.
It makes sense, I guess. But also, I just want to put this out there. There are so many people who are just whining, crying, complaining about what Kyle Shanahan said about Aiyuk. And to those people, I'm just going to just shut up. Seriously. You really think if Brandon Ayuk's not getting wide receiver 1 snaps, you really think Kyle Shanahan's going to go out there and say, yeah, this is our wide receiver 1 after he gets 15 snaps in one game? You really think Kyle Shanahan's going to go out there and say that? No. Kyle Shanahan's going to go at him. It's that simple. This is a guy who's supposed to be wide receiver 1. He's not living up to that potential. You got to keep it real with your guys. So massive shout out to Kyle Shanahan. Anyone just crying about it? These are the same people who are crying about Dante Pettis. I don't care if Brandon Aiyuk has more potential than Trent Sherfield. Trent Sherfield is the better receiver right now, according to Kyle Shanahan. He's giving this team a better chance to win. So therefore, Trent Sherfield should be on the field more often. So anyone complaining about what Kyle Shanahan said, you don't have a say. Just shut up. Seriously.
Kyle is mad that Aiyuk got PS5 before him. Hey, I'll be mad too. I can't get one. I can't get one. There's none available. Hey, Aiyuk, man, listen, if you're on my team, you got a PS5 before I did, I'd bench you too. So maybe
I don't have a
if that's
PS5.
the reason, Kyle, I understand you, bro. Because
That's a completely understandable reason. If I'm being
I need
completely
a
real,
PS5. I need a PS5 too, and if I got one, I need his PS5. But yeah, I mean, right now it's too early to say anything really for the most part. It's something to monitor, because of the history with obviously Matt Breida, Akella Witherspoon, Dante Pettis, just guys who went into the doghouse and really never made it out. I think, Witherspoon kind of made it out.
Witherspoon definitely. I would say Witherspoon made it out. That's the only player to make it out of the doghouse.
Yeah, but if
Dante Pettis never made it out. Who are some other guys that got in the doghouse? I'm trying to think of.
I think Breida. He got
Breida definitely did not get out of the doghouse.
Yeah, he didn't get out of the doghouse.
I forgot about Breida.
Pettis definitely never got out of the doghouse.
Oh, and speaking of Matt Breida, I know a ton of people were saying, "Oh, let's trade for Matt Breida." First of all, you got some guy off waivers. That was a lot better. You don't have to give up a pick for Matt Breida. And second of all, because he was in the doghouse, you really think Kyle Shanahan's going to let him back? I don't think they're giving him a second chance in San Francisco.
Yeah, I don't think the Niners need to go and trade for anybody.
Yeah, no, we're set. I think a waiver claim is perfect.
They got hasty. I mean, they're going to get Wilson back at some point. I mean, I think Kerryon Johnson and whoever they just signed, I forgot the name. Those guys are just on practice squad in case someone gets hurt.
Kerryon Johnson, I think the only reason they signed him is because it's for intel. They're playing the Philadelphia Eagles next week. He spent camp with the Eagles. I think Kerryon Johnson, he might not last long on this team. I think it's solely an intel move. Yeah, he could get promoted, but if we're being frank, he's really not that great of a running back. So,
I mean, I think any running back that gets brought into the roster at this point is only there.
They have a chance to succeed. They have a better chance to succeed for sure.
They have a spot to get a spot if someone gets hurt again. But if no one gets hurt and anyone signed in the practice squad won't play. I mean, that's just
exactly. And I think right now we have 3 better running backs. I don't really know much about this Tristan Cannon dude. I saw him.
That was the guy. Yeah, I think he's another guy who's just going to be on the practice squad.
He's on the 53 now.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, we used a waiver claim on him. So he's on the 53.
Well, probably just filling Mostert's spot.
Yeah, that's
maybe your theory about Kerryon Johnson's correct, where he's just there to provide intel on the Eagles from how they, I guess, worked in camp and who we need to keep an eye on. But for the most part, I mean, running back is set. I think they're going to be fine. Obviously, losing Mostert sucks, but I think they have the guys in the building to get the job done. And then as long as Kyle's calling the plays, lanes are going to be made for these running backs to make plays. They just got to make plays when they're there. I think they will. And I think Mitchell provides some confidence as well, seeing how he played in the opener. So, which leads into the opener game. Finally getting to the good, bad, and ugly from the Lions game. Let's start with the good. The good for me, Jimmy Garoppolo was fantastic in that game. There's really isn't much to complain about from Jimmy Garoppolo in that game. Maybe outside of a throw here or there, that third down throw on 3rd and 4 that could have iced the game. You'd like him to throw that out in front of Debo. But other than that, and then obviously the deep ball to Debo on the touchdown, which so the thing about that, some people called it a perfect throw. I won't say any names, but some people called it a perfect throw. That was not a perfect throw. Debo even said it wasn't a perfect throw. But to Jimmy's credit, he stood in there. Obviously, you got pressure bearing down on you. With that kind of pressure, you're not going to get the best ball out there. But you gave Debo a shot. He had 1-on-1 coverage, and Debo made a play. So, it wasn't the best throw, but you gave Debo a chance to make a play, and he did, and resulted in points for the Niners. So, I mean, if you want to get too nitpicky about it, obviously that wasn't a great throw, but it led to a great result. And, just for the most part, I mean, there's not much Jimmy could do there with pressure bearing down. Either he takes the sack or he gives his receiver a chance. Give receiver a chance, made a play, moving on. Garoppolo was good in that game. Defensive line was fantastic. D Ford, for the most part, was impressive. I think Armstead had a good game. A lot of people were on either he made no difference or he was fantastic in the game. From what I saw, I think he, moved Goff off his spot a lot and forced him to make some throws quicker than he would like to. I think Armstead had a pretty good game of Bosa. Penei Sewell had a pretty good game against Bosa, considering, but that could have been because Bosa. It could have been his first game back. Well, it is his first game back, so potentially he's a little rusty in terms of just playing. But Sewell, I mean, I know there's holding calls that people were talking about, but it's going to be holding on almost every play, I feel like, in the NFL. So once you get kind of just nitpicky about that, then you'll probably call holding call in every play. I think Sewell did well against Bosa, but Bosa had some good moments as well. I think the safeties were good. Jaquiski Tart was fantastic in run fill. He was good in coverage. Ward was good in coverage. Deommodore Lenoir was good in coverage in that game, which is a good news going forward, seeing as how obviously we're without Verrett now. There were a couple times when Lenoir got beat, but for the most part, it didn't result in any yardage. So, I think it was a good game from him. Al-Shaair was impressive. He was great in coverage. He was great, making tackles short of the sticks. That's another great game from him. And for the most part, those are the guys who stood out to me. That was my good from the game. What you got, Sam?
You kind of hit the two goods I was going to bring up. The first one is Deommodore Lenoir. I think being a fifth-round pick and coming in being the best cornerback on the field for the 49ers, it gives me a lot more hope with the Jason Verrett injury. I know how brutal that is to the secondary. But when you have a guy like Deommodore Lenoir play like that week one, play all the snaps, it gives you hope. I definitely think that he can step it up this year. If he can't step it up this year, then the Jason Verrett loss is not going to be that big. And then D Ford coming back. I thought D Ford was done for his career. He's not going to come back. And he comes back and has a phenomenal game. I'm so happy because I keep telling people he is the X factor of this defense, and he proved it yet again. And I mean, when D Ford is on the field, this defensive line is so much better. It's not even close. I mean, D Ford is the X factor of this defense, in my opinion. Offensively, I got to give it to the offensive line. They really protected Jimmy Garoppolo. This offensive line looks a lot stronger. They had great protection for Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think we gave up a sack. Is that correct?
We have one sack. It was on a blitz, though. It was on a blitz. There was no pickup.
So one sack on a blitz is really good to have right off the bat. That's just a phenomenal stat to have. And Jimmy Garoppolo, because of that, looked a lot more comfortable. So overall, I think the offensive line was my star for the offense. D Ford, Deommodore Lenoir on the defensive side of the ball.
I guess the other good would be Deebo Samuel, obviously. But I think that's kind of speaks for itself. I think most people thought Deebo looked good in that game. He was fantastic. Getting open over the middle of the field. So David Yang says we need more pressure up the middle. Goff was too comfortable most of the day. I disagree with that. I think they moved him off his spot quite a bit. He was had to rush some passes, and he made some errant throws because of pressure at times. I mean, not every time you get to the quarterback is going to lead to a bad play. I think the Niners did the best they could. Now, D'Amico Ryans ran some stunts on the defensive line. There were some times when Samson Ebukam was lined up at D tackle. Then there was a point where Bosa and Fort were on the same side at the same time. So maybe those stunts led to them potentially not getting as much pressure as they would have liked because they weren't as effective as maybe they were planned to be. But I think they got pressure on Goff pretty often. I think the defensive line was fantastic. I think the Niners had probably some of the most pressures in the league, at least for week one. I think they were tops in the league. I think they were pretty sure. I forget what the number. I think it was like 30 pressures. It was just tied with the Steelers, who also had a great game, at least rushing the quarterback. So no, I think they were fine rushing the quarterback, and I think they'll only get better as Ford and Bosa continue to work back from their injuries and get used to playing and knock off the rush. They didn't play any in the preseason, so that was the first game action, and for what it was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, Russ just knocking it off, especially there's a lot of guys on this defensive line that got hurt. Mo Hurst had an injury early on. Oh, Mo Hurst was on IR, so he didn't even play.
Yeah.
But Bosa and Ford, I think you look at the edges, obviously a bit rusty. No Kinlaw. You had guys getting first-team reps. I think it was Armstead and DJ Jones, if I'm correct. So those guys usually get first-team reps, but still, I definitely think when you look at this team, there's definitely a bit of rust to take off. Also, the Lions have one of the better offensive lines in the league, so it doesn't concern me too much how there was not that much pressure. The middle, as David just commented right there, the middle wasn't that impressive. I mean, yeah, I think overall, I mean, they have Frank Ragnow. Jonah Jackson did not have that good of a game, though. He's the left guard for the Detroit Lions, so I definitely think that's definitely created by some interior pressure. So overall, I definitely think it wasn't noticeable, but there was good impact, and the defensive line did their job. Did they exceed at doing their job? Not necessarily. It wasn't really noticeable, but overall, I definitely think the defensive line did really well.
Yeah, I think the interior line was better than they got credit for. I mean, Contavious 3 had a sack. I think Armstead had some good pressures up the middle. Now, obviously, we didn't see many blitzes from Fred Warner. or from the safeties. They get like maybe I count like maybe 4 or 5 blitzes, maybe if I remember correctly. I don't think it was a whole lot. But I mean, I guess we'll see how they do going forward. But I didn't have too much of an issue with the interior defensive line, which without Kinlaw, obviously we don't really know what the ceiling is of the whole entire line. But at least with edge pressure, you're at least going to be able to make quarterbacks uncomfortable and not allow them to sit there and just have to do as they will with the coverage and just have to weigh against with the defense. So I think it's fine. I think the defensive line was fine. That was definitely good for me. Now the bad, my bad was Kyle Shanahan's usage, and this is like a controversial thing. It always is with Trey Lance, but his usage of Trey Lance in that game, I wasn't very fond of. There was just you're running quarterback power on like a 3rd and 15. That just doesn't seem ideal. I know he had the touchdown pass in the red zone, but when you went out there and could Kyle, and this is the case people have been putting out there, like could Kyle have been doing this? Obviously, we know he likes to plan ahead, whether it be games ahead, weeks ahead, whatever it is. Is he trying to give the impression that whenever you put Lance out there, it's going to be a run play? Potentially. But my take on this is that this is a quarterback you invested, and I say 4 picks because they traded 3 picks away to get the pick to draft him with, and they drafted him with that pick. So I say 4 picks is what they invested in him. This is your quarterback of the future. I don't necessarily like using him as a gadget in the running game. And people disagree. You're saying, just Kyle is a mastermind and, using his legs to obviously create more favorable situation for the offense. But this is the guy who's supposed to be your franchise quarterback going forward. If you're not going to have him out there playing quarterback, I'd rather him be on the sideline, either learning and soaking in information, or be out there playing, one of the two. Or if you are going to play him, at least put him in a situation where you're not, limiting the playbook to just a couple of plays where it's like a couple of read options or a quarterback power, or just maybe just only having them throw in the red zone. Okay, at some point it's going to get predictable, and it's just you're really ruining the flow of the offense. There were some times when they put Trey Lance out there. I think it was a 3rd and short at one point where they just put him out there and ran a quarterback power and ended up not getting it and had to punt. And I'm just like, why wouldn't you just keep Jimmy in there? He has it going. Just let him do his thing with the offense and just keep it going. Kyle wants to put Trey out there and it doesn't work. And then, if this happens in a bigger game or in a more important time, this is when it starts to get problematic. And this is why this 2 quarterback thing, I was never really a fan of it to begin with. It's fascinating to see how he's going to use it, but for the most part, I just messing up the rhythm of the offense, messing up the rhythm of the quarterbacks. Make a decision. Either going to play Lance or you're not, and if we're going to have him go out there for a couple of run plays a game, I'd rather him stay on the sideline.
Yeah, that's definitely my offensive bad. My defensive bad for me has to be the cornerback play of Ambry Thomas and Dante Johnson.
Yes.
And I mean,
my ugly actually.
No, I have a different one for ugly, but overall, I mean, I think my ugly. I'll talk about my ugly after this. My ugly is just about how we got cute at the end. My bad is how the cornerbacks played because we got cute. We got in a situation where we got too cute and we had to play these cornerbacks. Dante Johnson, I mean, I've said enough about him in the past. I don't really need to tell you why I really don't want him on the field. Ambry Thomas is not ready to play at the NFL level. When he was drafted, he was a raw prospect. I'll say it again. He was a raw prospect, not ready to play at the NFL level. He showed that in camp, had a pretty poor camp. And people need to give this guy time. This is why we brought in Josh Norman. This is why we brought in Dre Kirkpatrick. Those guys are ready to play at the NFL level. Even though they may not be the best cornerbacks, they're better than Ambry Thomas at this point in time, and they can help develop Ambry Thomas. So overall, I do like how we brought in Dre Kirkpatrick after the game. That was definitely a necessary signing that we need. But it's definitely, I think Ambry Thomas, if anything, Ambry Thomas should be inactive for most of the, if we have to deactivate a cornerback every game, it should be Ambry Thomas and not Josh Norman or Dante Johnson or Dre Kirkpatrick. It should be Ambry Thomas because Ambry Thomas needs to be on the sideline learning, and he should not be in a situation where he has to be put on the field. I know he was good at punt returning and kick returning, but you don't want him in that situation where he's your cornerback on the field because he's not ready yet. We had to take him off. The Lions kept picking at him, and it didn't work out for us. So overall, I definitely think you have to take Ambry Thomas off the field. That's definitely my bad. And segueing into the ugly part. I mean, if we got too cute. I said this I tweeted this out at the beginning of the game. Offensive key of the game, don't get too cute. We got too cute on offense and defense. Hang on one second. Apologies, I'm just dying over here. But anyways, we got too cute on both sides of the ball, and that almost cost us the game. I mean, we were up 41-17, one touchdown. All right, that's fine. Then you botched the onside kick. And, I mean, you can blame Kittle all you want for that. I wouldn't say that's getting too cute. But Kittle usually doesn't play special teams, though, which was interesting to see him out there. So maybe you could say that's getting
team since we went out. That's why we just went out there to catch the onside kick. But I mean, it took a weird bounce. So I mean, I'm not excusing it, but it took a really weird bounce. Like it took a weird bounce. Just kind of rolling, then it bounced off him in his face.
Yeah, it bounces off his face. I mean, what I'm more upset about is how we play on that defensive drive. That's when you put in guys like Ambry Thomas and Dante. I know Verrett got hurt, but like they were just like testing everything out. They took some of their starters out, and we started to collapse. And then Debo fumbling the ball at the end. I mean, that was a disaster. Also, as you said earlier with the bat, with Trey Lance's runs on like 3rd and long, like why not get the first down? Secure this game. What's the point of that? So this team definitely got too cute on both sides of the ball, and we cannot have that happen. Especially the Lions are probably, besides the Texans, the Lions are the worst team we're going to play this year. So that's 16 more games.
Well, the Jaguars, they weren't great in week 1.
15 more games, excluding the Texans. So, Jags are not that good either, but they are better than the Texans, in my opinion. Even though they won, they'll get better. But you cannot get cute against the teams that are better, especially Philly next week. I said earlier, and we kind of talked about this on Twitter. If Emmanuel Mosley doesn't play, Devontae Smith and Jalen Reagor could have an absolute field day against a guy like Josh Norman. I mean, their offense is built on speed. And speed is something that has been killing the 49ers quarterbacks. It always has been. I mean, DK Metcalf, pretty fast guy, killed them 49ers last year. Other guys, I'm trying to think of some. But overall, I mean, speed has been killing the 49ers. Even John Ross in 2019 had a pretty good game against the 49ers. I mean, speed usually kills these guys. Also, Quez Watkins, another fast receiver. So you cannot get too cute because you're going to get blown out by these guys. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, my ugly was probably the same as yours. That end of the game situation. The drop pass by, first off, the bad throw from Jimmy Garoppolo, and then it leads into the drop pass by Deebo Samuel. Then the fumble by Deebo Samuel. Obviously, when you already have the first down, just get down. Then on defense, I mean, the defense is weird because they took the starters out for 2 of those drives, 2 of the final 3 drives, and they got close. And then they had to put the starters back out there. So would that happen again? If Dante Johnson wasn't out there and Ambry Thomas wasn't out there, probably not. So I mean, just overall, I just think, that end of the game was super ugly. It seems in a way like they lost focus a little bit. They just kind of started to get lax because they're up by so many points, and then even I take my L because I was like, hey, take the starters out. They take the starters out. The Lions come back.
I was like, take the starters out too, and I mean, it did not work out.
Yeah, it
was. I thought we had a big enough lead. I underestimated Jared Goff in the Lions offense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I overestimated our backups, thinking that they can hold on to a 24-point lead for longer than 6 minutes. So, yeah, I mean, I'll take my L there. But, I mean, overall, just that end of the game was super ugly. Niners almost found a way to lose that game. So, yeah, going forward, let's be a little bit sharper as the games end. This is something we'll get into more as we get into some of these overreactions here from you guys. I had you guys put some of your overreactions going into the rest of the season after that week 1 game. Let me pull up the tweets so I can read these. All right, here we go. I'll start with the first one. This one's from Dawson at TriggerHappy1234 on Twitter. Let's see. He says, now I personally don't think this, but could make the case Micah Ryans looks like a bad hire. So I'm not going to go too far as to say that. Now, Ryans will have a challenge going forward and how he wants to run this defense without Jason Verrett in the secondary. Niners ran a lot of zone in that game. There was a lot of single high looks, a lot of cover three, at least from what I saw. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong coverage, but for what I saw, they were very conservative in coverage, not a lot of man coverage. So I think as long as they can get pressure with their front four, I think they'll be fine defensively. I don't think Ryans has to do much. Now, obviously, one thing that's missing is the creative blitzes that Robert Saleh had with K'Wan Williams and Fred Warner. Now, obviously, it was just one game. DeMeco Ryans could have some things planned going forward to get some more pressure on these guys, or at least to take advantage of the skill set of K'Wan Williams and Fred Warner. But I think Ryans would be fine because there's a lot of talent on this defense still. Now, it obviously didn't have Red to work with in the secondary, but there's a lot of other good players in this defense. I think he should be fine going forward.
Yeah, I think DeMeco Ryans, I think that's a bit of an overreaction right there. There's still a ton of time for DeMeco Ryans. It's one game, and if anything, he got cute. He definitely got too cute. He can learn from that. I think it's definitely an overreaction. He did well as a linebacker coach here. As defensive coordinator, yeah, it's a step up. I think he still has a ton of time to prove himself. It's week one. It's way too early to say that it was not a good hire. Also, we won the game. At the end of the day, we won the game. That's all that. If your defense can help you win games, which it did right there, it's going to work out right there. And yeah, look at what Madison said right there, Paul Madison. People really forget how bad Saleh was as a DC. And I would also say his first 2 years. His first season was terrible. Second year,
people want him gone.
I want him gone.
I
thought keeping him. At one point, okay, in 2018 when Jimmy Garoppolo was hurt, or like, oh no, when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt towards ACL, my Twitter bio name was like blank days until Jimmy Garoppolo returns. I think for a solid week, I changed that to blank days until Robert Saleh is fired. I wanted that guy gone. I think most people wanted that guy gone. 2019, he proved why he was a good guy. 2020, he made the adjustments. He worked out really well, and look where he is now. He's a head coach. So overall, I definitely think you got to give DeMeco Ryans some time.
Yeah, DeMeco Ryans is, he has a lot better defense to work with than Saleh had, but I don't think I would. I mean, there were some issues in run defense a little bit. I guess that was another bad, from the game was early on run defense wasn't great, but there were some issues in run fill. I think Drake Greenlaw filled the wrong gap a couple of times, but there was some situations where Zach Kerr and Kevin Givens getting them pushed out of the way. Well, not Kevin Givens, DJ Jones. Kevin Givens was good in run defense. DJ Jones and Zach Kerr had some issues at times. But for the most part, I mean, they kind of shorted up towards the second half when they stopped. They had less wide nine looks because when you go wide nine, you have the line spread out that much. You put a lot of pressure on your linebackers to fill gaps, and if there's ever an issue, there's going to be a wide open lane for a running back to run through. So it just has to. I think I'm not a big fan of the wide nine look. I think it should just get rid of it and just continue to go with standard looks, maybe except for on obvious passing downs where you can really get your edges, kind of more of a head start against opposing tackles. But, the wide nine kind of messed them up in the run defense a little bit. And that kind of made the defense look worse than it was to start out that game. Next one is from Gershon at Gershon Singh. The 49ers aren't Super Bowl contenders without Jason Verrett.
I agree with that. I can definitely see that. I think Jason Verrett, I think people don't understand how brutal this loss is. Yeah. I mean, he is Diamador Lenore had a great game, but he's a 5th round pick, still unproven. It's early to say that this guy's a hit. All right, Emmanuel Mosley, decent, but who's going to cover DK Metcalf when we play the Seahawks? Who's going to cover DeAndre Hopkins? You look at the NFC West, who's going to cover Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp? Tyler Lockett. Who's going to cover guys like Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk? Those two guys had good games. So overall, I definitely think
compete for a title. The Buccaneers as well. Their receiving core was going to cover, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown.
And who's going to cover Devontae Adams week 3? I mean, the NFC is stacked with receivers. So I think losing Verrett, it definitely – I didn't think the 49ers were going to win the Super Bowl this year. I thought you're looking at a playoff seed at best. Probably the highest you're going to go is NFC Championship. Lowest is missing the playoffs somewhere on like the 500 line, even though you can't go 500 anymore. But losing Verrett, I definitely think it's the biggest loss this team could have had. And the fact that it happened week 1 is absolutely brutal. So I think this definitely can take the 49ers out of Super Bowl contention.
Yeah, it was going to be I didn't have them as Super Bowl contenders to go. I mean, as a Super Bowl favorite anyway, going into this season. I had them as a playoff contender. I think they're still that, but yeah, without Verrett, it just creates another weakness in this defense where obviously good quarterbacks and good receivers are going to be able to take advantage of it. Now, what could turn the tide is if this front seven is dominant as they were in 2019, which is possible with D Ford and Nick Bosa back. But I mean, it just makes things a lot tougher. You have a lot less room for error without Verrett in the secondary, and teams have a place where they can pick on this 49ers defense, a place that they can have success if things aren't going well, and just put some pressure on these corners to make plays that obviously are either young or just not normally starters. Emmanuel Mosley was a good cornerback too. Now he's in a situation where he's cornerback one when he does end up playing. And if he's not playing, then we have Josh Norman, who just got here. He's been on the older side, and he hasn't had the best season since leaving Carolina. And then we also have John Lenore, who's a rookie. And obviously he had a good game week one, but that was against the Lions receiving core. Eagles receiving core much better going forward. Seahawks, Packers, Cardinals, all these teams, much better receiving cores, much bigger threat in the passing game. So we'll see how these corners respond, but it's definitely, I think it definitely could keep the Niners from reaching the Super Bowl is if they can't find a way to have, obviously a successful secondary that can prevent big plays without a cornerback who's able to defend, a team's best receiver, going forward. So,
and speaking of Emmanuel Mosley being cornerback one, that guy got absolutely burned by DK Metcalf last year. And I know I said the Seahawks are going to probably finish last in the division, but still, you have to play DK Metcalf twice a year. They're going to pick apart Emmanuel Mosley. I'm telling you that right now. And even if Mosley's out last week, I think Jalen Reagor could have a massive week. I said that. I think if Emmanuel Mosley's out, I am banking on Jalen Reagor to go off this week.
Yeah, I mean, just not having a good corner gives teams somewhere to target the 49ers defense. They can, and there's ways to get around a pass rush, right? Like you can, obviously we saw the Cowboys game where the Cowboys were able to, and they didn't win the game, but they still had a great offensive performance, staying away from the Buccaneers, the front seven and getting quick passes. Obviously if you can get play action going, the Niners can't show up to the run defense, and if Javon Kinlaw is unable to play, then that can become a headache because then you have to worry about play action, and it gets to a point where there is room for this defense to underachieve massively, from where we may have expected them to be at. And that a lot of that starts because they no longer have their best corner. And whenever you lose your best anything, it's going to create a big hole because you don't have someone as good as your number one guy just sitting behind the number one guy most of the time. So, it's a secondary is now an issue. It was an issue going into the season. It's a bigger issue now without Jason Verrett. We'll see how they, tried to attempt to solve that issue. Will they make a trade? We hear, there's some rumors that they might have looked into Cam Dantzler, from the Vikings.
I think Cam Dantzler could be a guy where if he develops the way I think he could develop, he could cover DK Metcalf.
So,
or a guy
we'll
like
see if the Niners make that move, if the Vikings make that move. So we'll see. But yeah, that's not overreaction to me. Jason Verrett being gone could keep the Niners getting to the Super Bowl. So here's this one from Red Sass Be Real 29. He says, hottest take, we can't stay healthy no matter what we do, it seems. I mean, that's not a lot of the 49ers best players have injury history. What's up?
Can you repeat that? I didn't really hear that.
Oh, the question? It's from Brian at Red Sass Be Real 29. He said, hottest take, we can't stay healthy no matter what we do, it seems. I mean, a lot of the Niners' best players have injury history. I mean, Debo had injury history coming out of South Carolina. Aiyuk's had the hamstrings. Kittle's had injuries. Raheem Mostert, he's always had injuries. D Ford has a lot of injuries. Nick Bosa's had ACL injuries like twice in his career. Verrett obviously had a bunch of injuries. Jimmy Ward's had injuries. Chris Tart. All these guys have lengthy injury histories. And so I don't want to say it's because of the players themselves, but when you have many players who have that length of injury history, I think there comes a time where you expect to lose some of these people. And if it kind of avalanches the way it did last year, it can ruin your entire season. Obviously, you hope for better luck. In 2019, the Niners were able to stay mostly healthy, but the Niners, they got to find a way to get people who can be on the field. They continue to draft guys. Javon Kinlaw now. There's a guy who had knee injuries coming out of college. They draft him. And, NFL, here he is having knee injuries and knee issues. So it comes to a point in time where just the players you have on your team, it's just kind of just how they are. It's just kind of the way things trend. They tend to be on the injury list, more often than not. So, I mean, I don't think it's overreaction to say no matter what they do, because the players they have just don't have a history of staying healthy. And when that's the case, you can't really be surprised when they get hurt.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, like, we had a ton of injuries last year, and a lot of these guys are still on this team. You know what? They're going to have injuries. It's that simple. If you want this team to not have injuries, you're going to have to start this team from scratch. And considering the talent of this team, you obviously can't do that. So I think they're just part of the game. Injuries are part of the game. Do they kill us more than any other team? And is this team probably cursed? Yeah. But you know what? At the end of the day, we'll be able to fight through it at some time with some of these guys. So that's all I really have to say.
Yeah, you just got to hope it doesn't, just spiral out of control like it did last year. Because if it does, I mean, the season gets ugly real fast. This is from Ken Watana, obviously, the homie from the Allegiance app. We helped get one of our listeners at life_49ers, a jersey. So, shout out to Ken and what he's done with the Allegiance app. Yeah, download the Allegiance app. It's a good app, great for discussions. I gotta turn my noise back on. I gotta turn them off so I wouldn't get spoiled during the game. But all right, he says the week 1 results are terrible indicators of future or failure, and this is not an overreaction. It's a very reasonable take. Week 1 has resulted in a lot of out of the ordinary results. Last year, the biggest one was the Jaguars won their week 1 game against the Colts, who were a playoff team, and they went on to not win another game the entire season. So week 1 is most of the time the outlier in terms of a team's season. The Packers getting destroyed by the Saints does not mean that the Saints suck yet.
The Texans beat the Jaguars.
The Packers doesn't mean the Packers suck yet. Doesn't mean that Jameis Winston's the best quarterback in football. That's not what that means. I know Andrew will be happy to hear that. Andrew Pasquini, he's a big Jameis. I can't say his name right. Jameis Winston.
The Texans.
Fans. So the Texans, they're not.
Are they the best team in football?
To be a playoff contender, because they beat the Jaguars in week 1. So yeah, week 1 isn't a great, week to determine which team's going to be good and bad. It's a starting point. You can see where things start to trend. If things start to become a habit, if things start to continue to show up, and you can kind of realize that something is an issue or not. But as far as the grand scheme of the season, no, week 1 is not where you're going to find your answers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the week 1. I mean, I think this is a good turn. I think week 1 is good for this team because we learned how getting cute, it's going to hurt us. And yeah, it's an 8-point game. They're going to learn from that. You build up every week. By week 17, this team, if healthy, should be the best this team was. I mean, a week 17 team is going to be the week 1 team every single year if they're healthy, without a doubt. I mean, everyone goes throughout the years. So, I mean, yeah, exactly what he said. I definitely agree with that.
All right, we got a couple of Verrett questions. This one's from Roy Roberge. He says Verrett injury severity, which we now know is out for the entire season, could be a 4-game swing on the win-loss record. I don't think that's an overreaction because now you're looking at these matchups against these top teams. Obviously your divisional opponents. Just given that we talked about it a bit before with the last questions, but it just gives this defensive weakness a place where these teams can pick on the 49ers defense, whether you're picking on a certain corner or just being able to find ways to get things going in the passing game. Yeah, it could lead to some more L's that maybe wouldn't have been an L if Verrett was still there.
Yeah, I definitely think you look at. I mean, as I've been saying a lot throughout this episode, Jason Verrett, that injury is going to be brutal for this team. I think 3-4. I think he said 4 games, right?
Yes.
I think 4 games is a bit of an overreaction. I think you're probably looking at like 2-3. So basically 1 off. But at the same time, this can hurt this team significantly, especially when you look at the NFC West stacked at receivers. I also think you could have guys like Diamador Lenore develop. Manuel Mosley could develop. You could also make a trade for a guy like Cam Dantzler. I hope John Lynch is on the phone right now instead of listening to Talking Niners as he always does. But I think, John, you can take the week off, get Cam Dantzler on this team. That's all I really got to say.
All right, and this one is on the opposite scale of the spectrum from Vinny Saglambini. He says losing Verrett is a solvable problem that won't affect the 49ers as much as we think. Along the same lines, if you are to lose one Verrett, or Warner, Verrett is the most replaceable. So basically, is Verrett the most replaceable guy in the 49ers defense? No, I don't agree
Absolutely
with that. I think you can't replace what Verrett does and what his ability is. Now, can you work around it? With obviously what front seven play? I mean, potentially. But then again, we saw a fully healthy defense in the Super Bowl not be able to get it done. Where secondary, I mean, obviously Verrett was much better than Richard Sherman just because he was able to, play man coverage and able to play against the team's best receiver. But we saw what it looks like when you don't have a guy who can do that, a guy you can just put on the team's best corner and, best receiver and be able to just kind of just let it be. Niners it could cost them a game. It cost them Super Bowl, 2 years ago. I know people hate talking about it, but even with a good pass rush, if your secondary, has holes, if your secondary is, can be picked on, it could be an issue against certain teams. And there's some teams in this conference that they're probably going to be able to make, good work of the Niners being without Verrett for the rest of the season. And I think it is a pretty big. You can't really solve it because there's no way to replace Jason Verrett, and that's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, Jason Verrett. I think Jason Verrett on any other team would be somewhat replaceable. On this team, I don't think he's replaceable really at all. Considering the cornerback depth that you have behind him, it just does not work out for this 49ers team. Replacing Jason Verrett going to be very hard to do. You're going to need guys like Ambry Thomas. You're going to need guys like DeAndre Lenore to really step it up and take his spot.
I have a question from the chat from Sketchy Peasant. He says, do you think the 49ers should have kept their 2021 second-round pick and they could have drafted Dante Samuel Jr. instead of trading back and snagging Aaron Banks? Looking at this now, obviously, I think
hindsight's 2020.
We wanted cornerback second round, third round. That like in most of the mock drafts, most of the discussions we have in the offseason, that was where we wanted a corner to be drafted for the 49ers was in the second round, and Dante Samuel was there to be taken. The 49ers traded back. They draft Aaron Banks, and Aaron Banks has struggled. Now, obviously, Niners also need O-line help, so it's kind of like just who did they like more of that position, at least on their board. And I guess it was Aaron Banks, but seeing Dante Samuel playing, he had a pretty good week winning us for the Chargers. And then seeing it now, I feel like the Niners could have potentially invested more into the cornerback room, and Ambry Thomas not panning out so far doesn't help either, because there's other guys to be had in that second round, and they took Aaron Banks, and Aaron Banks isn't playing. He's a healthy scratch. So, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the Niners should have drafted Dante Samuel instead of drafting Aaron Banks. Now, obviously, hindsight's always 2020. So at the time, we would not have known that this would turn out to be such a blunder at the moment. Obviously, there's still time for Aaron Banks to turn this around, but right now it doesn't look good. And yes, the Niners probably should have taken Dante Samuel over Aaron Banks if we're talking at this very moment.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you look at the 49ers, Aaron Banks, you look at where the 49ers were at, I should say. Aaron Banks, that's a bit of a reach at 48. Most people have him round 3, round 4. Could have traded up. You could have gone probably you might have been able to get him at 103, I think we were at, something like that. But
and also that the Niners traded out to draft Trey Sermon, who was another healthy scratch. Maybe that pick on Aaron Banks instead of using it on Trey Sermon, and then you get Dante Samuel and maybe also Aaron Banks. So you get obviously both of your guys, but I mean, for the most part, I mean, it may have been a bit of a reach to take Aaron Banks, as you were saying, and they could have had him later and still had addressed corner earlier with a more promising prospect. Yeah,
and I was saying, I mean, they should have taken Aaron Banks a lot later than they did. I think trading back was good. You traded back one spot too far. Could have also got a guy. I was saying this guy all along from Syracuse University right there, Ifeatu Melifonwu, get him on this team. And he did pretty well for the Detroit Lions. Recovered that fumble at the end. Works out really well. I think the 49ers could have used him. He's NFL ready. Ambry Thomas is not. I think they could have got him, and it would have worked out totally fine. You could have taken at 48 too. I know he fell all the way to 102. Most people had second-round grades on him. I had a second-round grade on him. I think 48 would have been perfect for him.
Yeah, and I guess another thing is that the fact that they did get Dominor Lenore, and I mean, I guess hitting on one of the two isn't a terrible look, but at the same time, you could have potentially had to if you drafted Lenore still in the 5th round and drafted Asante Samuel in the 2nd round. You could have, I know, like I said, hindsight's 2020, but you could have had 2 solid guys. And since Aaron Banks isn't playing, wouldn't make much of a difference, as far as the Banks pick. And you could have still had Banks, in the 3rd round potentially. So, I mean, obviously it looks like a bit of a blunder for the Niners. I mean, it is what it is. We'll see how it goes, how it plays out going forward. But as of right now, in this very moment, it seems like it was a mistake to take Banks over Asante Samuel.
100%.
What was that? I went away from the questions. 1 second. Let me get back to the tweet. Here it is. All right. Let's see. The 49ers. This is from Eli Rodriguez at Eli R. Rodriguez. If the 49ers are going to be Super Bowl contenders, this offense is going to have to carry the team rather than being balanced like 2019. I agree with that. I think the Niners offense has to be like top 3 good if they're going to be Super Bowl contenders. And obviously, if your offense is top 3 good, your defense is like average, I think that's good enough. We saw that the Chiefs have done that for years. Their defense has been, slightly above average, but their offense has been fantastic, and we see where that's gotten them. Now, obviously, they have Patrick Mahomes, one of the best quarterbacks ever in the entire league. I won't say ever to play the game because it takes some years to put together a resume that you can continue, consider him to be the best ever. But he's one of the best in the game right now. And you see what that does for the Chiefs as a team. Their defense doesn't have to be great because their offense is great. And if the Niners offense can be great, then they can contend. Because their defense, I don't think the defense is going to be like bottom of the league bad. They'll be average at worst, most likely. I think they'll be above average this year. I think it's not overreaction. If the Niners can be now, the question is, can the Niners be elite on offense? And I think they can. I think they have enough, but they have to stay healthy. Obviously, they can't afford to lose Kittle, can't afford to lose Debo. I would say can't afford to lose Aiyuk, but right now we don't know as far as who's more important, him or Sherfield right now. But this offense has to stay healthy. They can't lose. They've already lost Mostert now. They can't lose anyone else who's important to this team on offense. But I think they can be elite on offense. Also, I guess the other question is what is Trey Lance's role? Does Trey Lance end up starting at this point at some point in the season? Because if that's the case, that could give this offense another element going forward. The deep passing game, also the running game may open up a bit more. So, I guess we'll see. But I think this offense does have potential to be elite. And if they can be elite, then I think they can go back to being in the discussion for Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I definitely think. You look at the teams in the past that have won the Super Bowl. Tampa Bay, balanced offense, great defense, I should say. Kansas City, great offense, great defense. New England, great offense, great defense. Philadelphia, the offense was okay, but great defense. They always say defense wins championships, but you have to have a balanced team. I know having a defense, we have that. The offense just has to step it up. And I definitely think you can't lose too many guys on that offense, specifically the offensive line. I think the offensive line, if you lose one of your linemen, I think you could be really screwed, especially guys like Alex Mack, Trent Williams especially. I think losing Trent Williams would be absolutely brutal because the guys behind them they're not ready. Aaron Banks is not ready to play the NFL. Jalen Moore needs more time. Tom Compton, should he even be on an NFL roster? I don't really know. Is Jake Brendel on that practice squad or active roster?
I think he's on active. I think.
All right. Well, anyways, he might need a bit more time. I know he had a good camp, but he might need a bit more time. Maybe he'll come into center. I don't really know. But overall, I definitely think this offense has to step it up and stay healthy. You just make sure everything's going right. Don't get too cute, as I've been saying this entire episode.
Next question is from the homie at Rohith Kanan 71. He says mental lapses and discipline will be the downfall of this team.
I don't think that's an overreaction whatsoever.
Yeah,
I
that's not
think
overreaction at all.
mainly,
I mean,
and it's
if it
mainly
doesn't continue
the
to happen, I don't think so.
it's mainly the mental lapses from coaches, not the players. The coaches have here, especially. I mean, Kyle Shanahan, great coach, but one thing that this coaching staff, even with Robert Saleh, they've not been able to do is adjust. There's a reason that Kyle Shanahan has only had one winning season in 4 years. And yeah, injuries, I mean, they help his excuses, but like at the end of the day, you can't have a ton of mental lapses. And the players, I mean, they have to be responsible as well. But the coaching staff has a ton of mental lapses when it comes to play calling, and that affects the players a lot as well. So overall, I think the coaches have a ton of mental lapses, but players also have been having mental lapses here and there. And I think mental lapses could be the downfall of this season. It almost was the downfall of the game against the Detroit Lions. And I definitely think that can continue throughout the season.
Yeah. Now the question is, will this continue to be an issue? I certainly hope not. It's hard to really gauge yet. That's really on the coaching staff to ensure that these players are, making sure that everyone is accountable, making sure all these guys know what they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing it, and also making sure the coaches are making the right decisions in game. But mental lapses have hurt this team in the past. They do show up at some of the worst times. And yeah, I mean, it could be the downfall of this team if in, a big game, there's a couple of mistakes and, losing an important game because of it. So definitely not overreaction. That definitely would be a downfall of this team if they cannot find a way to, make the right choices at the right time. This is from our guy at life_49. He said, not so hot take. A lot of freak things happened in that game. That will ever happen again. We get it cleaned up. We right the ship going forward. Now, obviously, yeah, it's week 1. There's some rust. There's some getting used to playing again at full speed for 4 quarters. And at the end of the game, yeah, something like that will likely, the way it unfolded, likely wouldn't happen again. But I think the one thing that you can't get cleaned up is the fact that you don't have Jason Verrett anymore. That's the one thing you can't get cleaned up. And that's something that could hurt this team going forward if they don't have if their quarterbacks turn out to be a weakness. Even we know they are a weakness, but they turn out to be a bigger weakness now without Verrett. Like even which that's right now it's easy to say that probably is most likely. That's one thing that happened in this game that could hurt this team going forward is the way the secondary looks without Verrett out there, and that continues to be a trend. Yeah, I mean that wasn't that might not have been a fluke kind of outcome as far as the secondary goes. It was apparent. Now, obviously, the team said that they were kind of thrown off a bit by just the situation with Verrett and just the suddenness of it. But at the same time, I mean, we know Dante Johnson isn't the greatest. We know Ambry Thomas hasn't been the greatest. We don't know what Josh Norman's going to look like. We don't know what Drake Kirkpatrick is going to look like. John Lenore, obviously, at some point, he's going to have his rookie moment, So, I mean, going forward, I mean, it's just there isn't a whole lot of reason to be confident in the secondary. And the front seven, you just hope that they can make such a big impact that it won't matter. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, that's the one thing from this game that could turn out to be an issue going forward. It's just the secondary and just how it looked without Verrett.
Yeah, I mean, losing Verrett's absolutely brilliant. You definitely cannot replace that whatsoever. But other than that, I definitely think this team could get its feet back, get going, all that stuff. And losing Mostert too, that's another thing that was kind of brutal for this team. So at the end of the day, I think those two are really the only bad things that happen other than like other stuff. But I think this team can bounce back, get back on their feet. Now, to answer Dawson's question, do you think some of the people worrying about you care more for fantasy than the 49ers? That's tough. I think people worrying about Aiyuk, the thing with that is I think if I have him on some of my fantasy teams, I'm stashing him. I'm not too worried about him, but I think people are more worried about him as a 49ers fan, I'm more worried about him for the 49ers, but if you're not a 49ers fan, you're probably more worried about him for your fantasy team. That's probably the best way to put it.
I don't think the worrying is about fantasy. I think the worrying is the doghouse, and the fact that the doghouse is a thing that's happened to players on this team before. And Vish had a tweet earlier today, so I can find it real quick because I
It's a thing about Dante Pettis, right?
Yeah, it was about like he's not saying the situation is Dante Pettis, but he said he did see the similarities. And yeah, here it is right here. Here's what Shanahan said after the 49ers Week 1 game against the Buccaneers in 2019, which was when we noticed that Pettis wasn't getting a lot of run. Shanahan said he's had health issues. That's why he missed a week of practice. He just got cleared to come back on Monday, so he was a little behind the 8 ball on that. But he didn't start the game, and we didn't have a ton of long drives where we got into the substitution flow. And so you think back to this game with Aiyuk, and it's kind of the same thing. Aiyuk had the injury. Shannon said he's still working back to getting back, involved with the offense, and you're kind of building up kind of accountability and just things of that nature. And you think about it, like Pettis. I mean, people forget Pettis at the end of 2018 looked good. He was good separation. He had a couple of big games here and there. He had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against Seattle. He had some good games, when he came back from his kind of just midseason, just a trend. Like he started off real slow. I think Aiyuk kind of did too in a little bit. Just kind of started off slow, and he really picked up after a certain point. And the same thing with Aiyuk. It was after he got COVID. He came back and he picked up, and he looked like one of the best receivers we had seen, on the Niners in a while. And Pettis at some point did look that good. Now, obviously, Aiyuk looked much better as a route runner and just as a receiver overall. But there are similarities to how this is trending. Now, this has turned out to be the same. This is why people are worrying, because it's just we've seen this before with a receiver who Shanahan really liked and traded up for. Just that's the worry, is that this is like the same thing happening again. And obviously, it's too early to say whether this is that situation or not. But there is reason to be concerned. I think it's not just fantasy. I think it's just the fact that people don't like the fact that Shanahan is so just has this thing where, like you said, Sam, you said you didn't like that people were having an issue with Shanahan wanting more from Aiyuk, because it's like, hey, if he's not doing enough to be out there over short field, then he shouldn't be out there. But at the same time, people are like, this guy's a baller, and they feel like Shanahan is holding him back in a way because of the fact that he's being so hard on him. And so people may feel like it's just a bit extra and just a bit of an ego thing with Kyle Shanahan, which I think there is times that Shanahan's ego does tend to get in the way at times with decisions. But I mean, we'll see. Maybe Aiyuk has the mindset and the personality to get through this kind of thing that maybe Dante Pettis didn't, that Matt Breida didn't, that for a time Akilla Witherspoon didn't. Pettis did come out and say that he wasn't practicing as hard as he could have been when he had a press conference or interview in New York with the Giants, talking about his time in San Francisco. But I mean, there are some similarities there, and I don't think it's just a fantasy thing. I think it is kind of just like we've seen this before. We're hoping this isn't the same thing again.
Yeah, I really think the doghouse is what scares you. You don't want to get a guy like Brandon Aiyuk in the doghouse, but if he has to go in the doghouse, then put him in there. Teach him a lesson. You got to make this team better one way or another. You can't just let Brandon Aiyuk say, oh, first round pick, he's good to go. You can't do that. You just got to put him in the doghouse. If he deserves to be there, then put him there. That simple.
I think there was a list of guys that Shanahan traded up for, and that's where this history comes. I think Dante Pettis is one.
His history is terrible.
I think everyone that he's traded up for turned
Joe Williams
pan out.
Did he trade up for CJ Beathard?
He did.
So CJ Beathard, Dante Pettis, God, man, who else? I mean, Aiyuk, Sermon.
Yeah.
Oh, Colton McKivitz. Yeah. Trade up for Colton McKivitz.
There's a lot of guys that Kyle traded up for. There's a lot of guys that Kyle traded up for that have not panned out or not turned out to be who Shanahan thought they were. And that's kind of where this fear comes from. It's just a fear that this might be the same thing again. Hopefully it's not. Only time will tell, but it is something to monitor for sure.
It's really sad when it's really sad when the best player you've traded up for is Charlie Warner. That's sad.
Yeah. I mean, I think this fear also is kind of with Trey Lance as well, because they traded for Trey Lance. And, some people don't agree with the way that Shanahan is doing this and the way that he's trying to bring Trey Lance along. Now, there's a lot of time to go with Trey Lance. And obviously, he's going to get more opportunities than any other player is going to get, so just because of the fact that he's a quarterback and now the big decision. But the guys that Shanahan trades up for, the guys that he just feels strongly about, sometimes they just don't really pan out. And, there's a history of it. I mean, it's not something we're making up. It's something you can go back and look and see. And so, yeah, it's something to monitor. That's really all you can say. Next question here from Sports Only 14. He says, trade Jimmy before he gets hurt.
No.
Depends on what you get, man. It depends on what you get. I don't think you have to try to trade him. The Niners shouldn't be calling people. People should be calling them. That's what I think. I don't think you're going out of your way to trade Jimmy, but if someone wants him and they're offering like maybe a third or a second, I think you take it. But I don't think you go out of your way to trade Jimmy.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the hammer on the nail right there. I mean, it's that simple. You don't trade Jimmy unless the team calls you and it's for a good price. Right now, he's your QB1, and it should be that way until Trey Lance is ready. You don't trade your QB1 unless you have a backup plan that's ready.
All right, here's the last question from @Rocha ENT_YT. Defense will bounce back and hold Philly to less than 20 points. I disagree. I think Philly is a tougher challenge than we thought coming in, which we can talk about actually now, since that'll be how we finish off this show, talking about a little bit going into the Philly game. So, watching the Philly game, things that stood out to me is the defensive line was fantastic on Sunday. They gave Matt Ryan an absolute headache. Now, in run defense, they gave 100 yards in the first half to Atlanta. So, at some point, they kind of shorted it up, but I feel like Shanahan can find a way to run this defense, and if they can do that, then they can work in the play action game, and that will make passing the ball a lot easier. Obviously, creating windows over the middle of the field for Jimmy Garoppolo to work it to either Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Aiyuk, or Trent Sherfield, whichever one of those two ends up getting more snaps, or is just more of a focal point in the offense. So, offensively, I'm not too worried. The defensive line is better than the Lions, so they could, offer more of a challenge. I mean, I guess the matchup to watch would be McGlinchey against Brandon Graham. Graham had a good game. But other than that, I think that the offensive line should hold their own. Now, offensively, obviously, one thing that stands out is the speed of these receivers. Quez Watkins has real-time speed. Devontae Smith, obviously, we know is a guy who is a great route runner and has great speed as well. Jalen Reagor, another guy with great speed. And then you think about just Jalen Hurts and another mobile quarterback. And now that the Niners have Trey Lance, could they be a little more prepared for, a mobile quarterback, since they have a guy that can use exactly how they use Jalen Hurts in this game? Yeah, but, expect to see a lot of bootlegs and rollouts and just, making use of Jalen Hurts' mobility. They ran a lot of screen plays to try to get their guys to its speed and space. They didn't throw the ball deep much. Now, obviously, week one isn't just the tell-all be-all for how a team is going to run their offense. There's probably some things that they may use that they didn't use in that game. But for the most part, they didn't really look to attack defenses deep. It's really more so about just making sure that you get guys on the ground before they get ahead of steam. Because once that happens, they can kind of run by you. And they did multiple times in that game. Miles Sanders had a good game running the football. That's the thing to watch, because the Niners' run defense was a little shaky to start the game. They got a little better towards the end, but I think the Eagles' offensive line is also pretty solid for the most part. And then obviously just Jalen Hurts' mobility. You have to worry about the read option. You have to worry about bootlegs. You have to worry about him scrambling. Discipline. It's going to be a big thing for this defense. It's the first time that we're seeing D'Amico Ryans have to obviously defend against a mobile quarterback. We'll see what this game plan looks like. The Eagles could give the 49ers, a headache. I don't think holding them to less than 20 points is a thing that might happen. They might get more than 20. Detroit scored 33. I know a lot of it came late in the game, but Detroit moved the ball early too. They got stuff in the fourth down. They missed the field goals. A couple things that happened that had kind of put them behind the 8 ball, but they were able to move the ball too. And now they've done Jason Verrett, and now these receivers are much better than the Lions receiving core. I think it'll be I think it'll be more of an offensive game than a defensive game. This could be a game where both teams are scoring in the high 20s, maybe even in the 30s for the most part for me.
Yeah, and having a dual threat quarterback like Jalen Hurts has always been a challenge, a massive challenge for the San Francisco 49ers. And I think you got to make sure that you can get the pressure and get to Jalen Hurts and keep him in the pocket. That's the big thing. If you get the pressure, you give him less time, you keep him in the pocket, they can't run their offensive plan as well as they want to. So I think that's the big thing for the defense. You got to make sure to do that. On the offensive side of the ball, the Eagles defense is not the best defense in football. It's probably a below average defense. You look at that defense, not the best. So overall, I definitely think you can definitely win this game on offense. Your defense just has to step it up, though. This should be an offensive game overall. I think the key to the offense for the 49ers is probably just making sure you get that run game going. No Mostert this time. We'll have to see how this impacts the run game. In the past, it hasn't impacted them too much, but now that season ending, you're going to probably see a lot more snaps to guys like Trey Sermon, to guys like Elijah Mitchell, and guys like Michael Hasty than you would hope to see at this point of the year. So overall, the run game has to get going. The defense has to get pressure. I think in the end, the 49ers are going to win. It's going to be a close one. I also don't, even though it's an offensive game, I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as the Lions game. I think you're probably looking at like 35-30 win for the 49ers. So somewhere in that range, but not as high. I think that's what you're probably looking at.
All right, I guess we will do our little over/under. Little thing. Let me find the spread for the Niners as of right now in this game.
I want to say it was Niners plus 3, under 3, or under 2.5.
So the line is Niners -3. I think I take the over. I think Niners win by more than 3, maybe by 7 or 10 potentially, but it'll be a much closer game. Now I don't think the Niners lose to the Eagles. I think they're still a better team than the Eagles, but I think the Eagles could provide a little bit more of a challenge than the Lions did, which just seems weird to say. The Lions, we only lost by 8 points. But I mean, the Eagles, I think they stay in the game longer. I think they offer more of a challenge than the Lions did. And I think this game is going to be closer, but I think the Niners still win by more than 3 points.
Yeah, I got to take the over on that. I definitely think I can see the line hitting at even. It could be a 3-point game, but I think right now I'm going to take the over. As I just said, 35-30. Good score prediction in my opinion. So that's obviously the over. I'm going to take the over for this game as well.
All right, and that will do it for the show. That was the longest show we've had in a while.
Longest show we've had. Felt even longer. I was dying. I popped.
It's unfortunate that our longest show had to happen on a day where you were super sick.
Oh my goodness, dude!
But the show goes on.
The show must go on, even if it's absolutely brutal.
Thank you guys for listening. That's gonna
do it for us. By the way, if you guys are listening to the audio version, just watch the stream version. How many times I turn off my camera and mute myself? I'm just coughing.
Yeah, I mean, I have to not get distracted by it because I just see your screen just go black and it's oh, he has to go.
It's brutal, yeah.
And just
get ugly. I don't know that I feel better.
All right. Make sure you guys follow us on our socials at Talking Niners Pod, where you can keep updated with all the episodes when they come out. Any news we have about the podcast at the moment. You can follow us individually at Kobe Ransom 49GM, at Niner Wire Sam. And you can find the links to our YouTube channels if you're listening to the podcast version in the description of the show. If you're watching the YouTube version, you want to have access to the podcast version in case you're on the road or anything like that, that is also in the description. So yeah, make sure you sub to the channel. If you're watching YouTube, make sure you sub. Make sure you like the video, and that will do it for us. Niners have a game that seems a little more intriguing this week against the Eagles, and we will see how it turns out. So I think the Niners win this game. They should win this game. Hopefully, we're 2-0 going into our home opener against the Packers. And that will do it. As always, go Niners.
See ya.